Hi everybody, welcome back. This is going to be week 3. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next section, which is 8.3, and we're only going to be covering this section this week. We're not going to do 2 sections. We're just going to focus on section 8.3. So in previous sections, we learned how to multiply a monomial into various types of polynomials, either a binomial or a trinomial. We also learned a little bit about factoring. We're going to expand upon factoring a little bit later. We're going to go back to multiplying. Just like in previous sections, I encourage you to have something to write with and something to write on. Go ahead and pause the video now and give these 2 problems a try on your own. All right, so at this point, you should have given them a try. You're just using the distributive property, so it should be pretty fair game. Let's go ahead and go over the answers. So for number 1, you're going to take the outside term and multiply it to each of the inside term. Notice that for this first product, you're going to need to use properties of exponents, which says that if you multiply 2 things together and the base is the same, you simply add the exponents. Each of these has an exponent of 1, so I'm going to have to insert an exponent of 2. So it's a bit of a review on how to insert an exponent. You'll click Format, Text, Superscript, type your exponent, go back to Format, Text, Superscript, and it turns the exponent off. And then I can just keep going. X times positive 3 gives me positive 3x. I'm just going to uncapitalize that. Not a huge deal if it capitalizes it for you. You can leave it like that. All right, next one, 7 times x gives us 7x, and then 7 times positive 3 gives us positive 21. All right, so hopefully you got both of these correct. Now here's a question. What if I took this term on the outside and this term, and I stuck them together in their own binomial? So now instead of multiplying each of them separately, I've got a binomial times another binomial. How would you simplify something like this? Well, there's a couple different ways that we're going to go through. One way is to use kind of what we just used, the distributive method. When you're looking at 2 binomials, we call this distributive method FOIL. Okay, so off to the side here, I'm actually going to type what FOIL stands for. It's a, what's the word, an acronym? I want to capitalize it, FOIL. Each of those letters stands for a word. It's basically telling you the order in which you're going to multiply. It stands for first, outer, inner, and last. Okay, and the reason why I usually avoid this word is because it only works for 2 binomials. The second you have, say, a binomial times a trinomial, or a trinomial times another trinomial, the second that one of your polynomials is not a binomial, you can't refer to these letters, okay? As you can see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 words. Well, if I count up how many terms we actually are multiplying here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's actually telling us how we're going to multiply. So what FOIL is telling us to do, I'll try and color code things as I go, is take the first terms in each of the binomials, okay, this term, and multiply them together, okay? So if I take the first 2 terms, x and x, that's going to give me x squared, okay? Then it's saying take the outermost terms being the terms that are farthest away from each other on the outermost parts of the parentheses. Well, for the first binomial, it's going to be this one. And for the second binomial, it's going to be this one. They're on the outermost parts of the problem, okay? If you look at this problem as if it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, we're looking at the beginning term and the ending term. And I multiply those 2 together. X times 3 is going to give me positive 3x. Then the next word says inner. This tells me to multiply the 2 innermost terms. In other words, the 2 middle terms. So again, if I look at this as if it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, I'm looking at the 2 innermost terms, the ones that are pretty much almost touching each other. I multiply those 2. 7 times x gives me 7x. Oops. And then the last product comes from the last terms in each of the binomials. So if I look at these two binomials, here's the last term in the first binomial, here's the last term in the second binomial. I multiply those and get 21. So that's how you multiply two binomials together. Now what you might notice is that we can actually keep going to simplify this. See how we have these two terms here? In one of the sections that we covered, we learned how to combine like terms and simplify polynomials a little bit with adding and subtracting. So if you have like terms, you should always go all the way and simplify those. The x squared is going to stay the same. And the 3x plus 7x, I can combine those to give me 10x. And then the plus 21 just comes down for the rod. X squared does not have a like term. 21 does not have a like term. Here's my final answer. I can't simplify this any further. Again, if you're someone who likes to put a box around your final answer, feel free to do that. You could also highlight it. Just remember, if you're doing a box, you're going to have to make the box transparent so you can actually see through it. But this is considered fully simplified. So the distributive method basically says you take each of the terms, multiply them together, and at the very end, if you have anything that can be combined, you do so. Okay, that's FOIL. Here's method number 2. I actually really like this method because it's just visually, for me, it's easier. That being said, it really doesn't matter what method you use. You should get the same answer every single time. And as you might notice, this is the same product that we just multiplied. So I'm going to show you that regardless of method, we should get this as our final answer, x squared plus 10x plus 21. We get a quadratic trinomial. The table method is going to require that we insert a table. So I'll show you how to do that easily if you're on Google Slides. So here's how you're going to have to determine how many rows and columns you'll need. You'll need however many rows and columns determined by the number of terms in each polynomial. So I've got 2 terms in one of my polynomials. So that'll translate either to 2 rows or 2 columns, depending on where you put this. And I've got 2 terms for this polynomial. That'll translate into either 2 rows or 2 columns, depending on where I put it. So I'm going to insert a table. Let's see, where do I go to do this? So oh, here we go. Insert a table. I know I want 2 rows and 2 columns. Additionally, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put additional 2 rows and 2 columns for my table, so that way I can put the terms on the outside. Okay, so basically what I'm doing here is I've got my 2 rows and columns where I'm going to multiply, and I've got a couple extra on the side. You don't have to do it like this if you don't want to. You can just do 2 rows, 2 columns, and just insert text boxes. But basically here, my 2 rows, 2 columns. Let me see if I can highlight that. I'm going to highlight it pink. Can I do that? No, that's just going to highlight the text. Can I highlight it like this? There we go. So basically, here are my 2 rows and 2 columns. What I was trying to do when I inserted this table is I want basically titles, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these 2 terms and put them above 2 columns. And I'm going to take these 2 terms and put them in front of my 2 rows. This box right here, I'm just not going to use it. So above one of my grids, and it doesn't matter where, so long as you're keeping your terms together. So for example, wherever I put this x, I have to make sure that the 7 is being placed near it. So I'm going to place my x above column 1. So I'm making this a column term, which means that the next term in that same binomial has to also be a column term. It's a positive 7, so I'm going to type 7. And if you guys have done, what are they called, Punnett squares in science class, I don't know if you guys have done that yet. This is pretty much the same idea. We're doing a Punnett square, okay? Next binomial, we're going to take the first term, which is x, and I'm going to put it in front of row number 1. Since I'm putting this term in front of a row, I need to keep these terms together. I need to put this 3 in front of a row. So that's what I'm going to do. You don't have to center your stuff like this. I'm just doing it because I like the way it looks visually. And then what you're going to do is multiply across rows and columns. So in this upper left box here, I'm going to do x times x. So basically the two terms that if you kind of looked at where they would intersect, that's where you're going to put their product. X times x gives me x squared. And then here, I'm going to multiply 7 and x. That's going to give me 7x. Okay? In the next box down here, I'm going to do x times 3. That's going to give me 3x. And then in the last box, 7 times 3 gives me 21. And same thing like last time, wherever you have, let me see if I can insert something here. Scribble. Wherever you have like terms, and in this case it'll almost always be along a diagonal, you're going to combine those terms together. So here's going to be my final answer. My answer is going to have an x squared, so I'm going to write that. Stop capitalizing it. Oops, not s, x, there we go. And then my next term, I'm going to combine these two terms and get a plus 21, oops, not multiply, Ken, 10x, there we go, plus 10x. And then the last term just comes down for the ride. So here is my final answer, which I will box for you so it's nice and clear, and I'll make it transparent so you can see through it. So to recap the two methods that we're going to be utilizing in this lesson, you could use the distributive property, which if it's two binomials, we call it FOIL, first, outer, inner, and last. And we get all of our products. After we're done multiplying here, this step is an addition-subtraction step. So we're not multiplying these two terms together here that I've highlighted. We are adding them together to get 10x. Okay, very important distinction there. Some of my students in previous years would multiply the like terms. No, you're only multiplying in this first step. After you've multiplied, you add or subtract. You can also use the table method, which however many terms you have is however many rows and columns you'll need. And then I like to put the two terms that we're multiplying together on the outside of either the columns or the rows, and you just multiply where those rows and columns would intersect. And then combine anything that's alike, usually found across the diagonal. And this is another reason why I prefer this method, is because visually you can see the like terms a little bit easier. And we got the same thing, okay? All right, so let's expand upon this and do a binomial times a trinomial. And notice we're not using the word FOIL here, even though it's telling us to use the distributive property. And that is because we don't have two terms and then two terms. We have two terms and then three terms. So the word FOIL isn't going to translate over here, but the idea is still the same. We're going to take this first term and distribute it into each of these three terms. I'm going to do that now. 2x times 5x squared is going to give us 10x cubed. Two x times 4x is going to give us positive 8x squared. 2x times -1 is going to give me -2x. And I have completed distributing this first term into everything into this trinomial. Now I move to the second term. Same idea. I'm going to take the second term and multiply it into everything in this trinomial. Make sure that when you do this, if there's a minus sign in front of anything, you're including that as a negative in front of the number. So we're going to take -7 and multiply it with 5x squared. That's going to give us a -35x squared. -7 times 4x gives us a -28x. -7 times -1, the two negatives cancel and give us a positive, and 7 times 1 gives us 7. All right, so our multiplication step is over. Now we need to look for all the terms that can be combined. I only see one cubic term, so that doesn't get combined with anything. I see a quadratic term and another quadratic term. I can combine those, but be careful, their signs are different. So I'm going to combine those, and again, you can use a calculator if you want, if you've got one. If I combine those, that gives me a -27, and it's going to have an x squared on it. The 10x cubed comes down for the right, so I'm going to write that first, 10x cubed, and then a -27x squared. All right, so these two terms are gone. Now I keep going. I have a linear term and another linear term. Their signs are the same, so I'm going to combine them, but I'm going to match the sign of the things I add. Remember, two negatives only make a positive with multiplication and division. We are adding here, so it stays a negative. That gives me 30x. And then that takes care of my two linear terms. And then I've got a constant, which does not have anything it can get combined with, so I just bring it down for the ride. Here is my final answer. 10x cubed minus 27x squared minus 30x plus 7. It is a cubic 4-term polynomial. All right, so again, this is the same product that we're going to get. I'm just going to show you that we're going to get the exact same answer I just got here, but I'm going to use the table method. And you could do a 2 by 3, or you could do a 3 by 2. It really doesn't matter where you put the terms, so long as these terms are together wherever you put them. So if you put them as row terms, you put them both as row terms. Or if you put these as column terms, they are both as column terms. I think I'm going to do these as rows and these as columns. And again, it does not matter how you do it. So let's see. I'm going to go to Insert, Table. That means I'm going to need 2 rows, and I'm going to need 3 columns. Okay? And again, I'm going to insert enough grids here so that way I've got my 2 terms that I'm multiplying and my 3 terms that I'm multiplying, and then I've got a 3 by 2 or a 2 by 3 table on the inside, meaning, let's see if I can move this, move it right here, meaning here's my 3 by 2. That's where I'm going to put all of my products. And then on the outside, I'm going to put all of my terms for the trinomial up here, and I'm going to put all of my terms for my binomial right here. And as usual, this little square right here, we just ignore it. I'm going to center everything. That's just my style. I like the way it looks. You don't have to if you don't want to. All right, so my binomial, they're going to be row terms, so I've got a 2x. And I have a -7. Again, you want to include the negative sign, all right? It's attached to that number. Students always ask me, is this a negative or is this a minus sign? It's the same thing. They're both the same thing. All right, my columns, I'm going to have 3 columns. one of those is going to be titled 5x squared. And then the next one is going to be a 4x. And then the last one is going to be a -1. And like last time, I'm just going to multiply the terms for where they would intersect. So this first box here, I'm going to multiply 5x squared with 2x, and that's going to give me 10x cubed. My next term, I'm going to take column 2, row 1. That's going to give me 8x squared. This grid here, I'm going to take column 3, row 1. That's going to give me a product of -2x. Okay, so that takes care of all the products for row 1. Now I'm going to move to row 2. Row 2 times column 1, that's going to give me -35x squared. Row 2, column 2, -28x. Row 2, column 3, +7. The two negatives cancel. And again, my like terms, I've got a quadratic and a quadratic across the diagonal. And I've got some more like terms, a linear and a linear. So I've got a cubic that doesn't have any like terms, and then a constant that doesn't have any like terms. So now I'm just going to combine everything that I can combine. 10x squared doesn't combine with anything, so I'm going to list that first. If I combine these two, again, I should get a -27x squared. And then if I combine these two, I should get a -30x, and then the +7 comes down for the ride. Here's my final answer. Make it transparent so you can see it. And as you can see, we get the same answer using two different methods. So here's a snapshot of what our homework for the week is going to look like. It's all going to cover this topic. So on Wednesday, you'll have two things to complete. One of them is going to be your online learning slides, okay, where you're going to type out all of your answers on a Google Slides. Here it is. Okay. The next thing that's going to be due on Wednesday is going to be a CUDA worksheet. It's going to be interactive, so you'll be able to type on it. And then on Friday, you'll have another worksheet, which looks like the one that's going to be due Wednesday, but it's going to be called Worksheet B. Okay, so 2 homework assignments due Wednesday, 1 homework assignment due Friday. If you run into any issues, let me know. As is usual, you can comment things in Google Classroom if you're getting stuck, or email me. Okay, take care.